Well, good evening, and thank you for tuning in online tonight to our Wednesday night broadcast at Victory. We're so thankful for each and every one of you that tunes in for all our services, whether it be on Sundays or Wednesdays. We're just very, very thankful for that. One of the things that we strive to do here is to develop a deeper walk with the Lord as well as deeper connections with one another. And we do that through groups, small group settings that meet here on campus. And we would love for you to be a part of these groups if you aren't already. We have multiple times that they meet, Sundays and on Wednesdays. Tonight, right after we hear from some special music from our worship team, we're going to move into one of those groups and let you hear and experience the teaching. We hope and trust it's a blessing to you tonight. Thank you so much again for being here this evening.
The song talks about that. The healer in the grave was able to break every chain. I wonder if the man who once was blind watched the sunset on that Friday like it was the last time as he waited for his sight to fade, 'cause the healer was in the grave.
I wonder if the leper shook with fear as he touched his children's faces. Was he fighting back the tears? Would he once again be marked by shame? 'Cause the healer was in.
Like he knew he'd be returning to the life that he had left, to that hopeless place he used to lay, 'cause the healer was in the grave. But the healer in the grave, oh, he did not stay. He conquered death forever, breaking every chain. In overcoming power, he rose on that third day when the stone was rolled away. It ended every question, it settled every doubt. Sure, they put him in that tomb, but you can't count him out. Oh, the healer in the grave, oh, he did not stay. He conquered death forever, breaking every chain. In overcoming power, he arose on that third day when the stone was rolled away. When the stone was rolled away. When the stone was rolled away.
Alrighty, and so just a reminder again, those that are watching and tuning in now, that we will be having a special service on May the 7th, and we'll be having one combined service at 10:30, not the two morning services. Your 9:15 groups will be meeting as normal, and the 10:30 groups will meet at 9:15, and then we'll have a 10:30 service. And that will flow into a business meeting, and then we'll have after church, we'll have barbecue, getting ready for the missions trip. So you're more than welcome to eat, and it's a donation base for the missions. This Sunday, we will have an evening service, then right after that, baptismal service, and then we'll have a Spanish service on the evening service there. So we're making plans for that. All right, in Exodus chapter 13 is where we'll pick up today. I do appreciate all your prayer and thoughts about the services and the funeral down in Florida, and all that went well. Tell you what, we were blessed. I don't know if you heard, but Cal Key was in a accident. He drove down Friday morning right after the service, right after he had a he's a golf coach. He had a golf tournament, and he left later and was driving down Friday night. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. He was about 15 minutes from being where he was staying at with some other family members, and just drifted off to sleep at that point. And he crossed the road. You know, he's going on the right side, right? Crossed over the left, jumped some railroad tracks, missed trees, ended up snapping a telephone pole wire, and things like that. And he was down in there. There's no way that you ever would have found him because of where his truck landed had he not been alive and be able to walk out and to be able to, he didn't have self-service and was able to have to walk out and was able to finally got 911, and it was just a miracle. He had a few scratches. That was actually from walking out. His truck is totaled. There's not a straight piece on his truck anywhere, top, bottom, right, back, front. It was just a miracle. And so it could have been a different weekend for the family, had God not had his hand protection on him. So, you know, the prayer that you pray for your children and grandchildren, you know, are super. And for others, you know, when you hear somebody make it traveling, just ask them as if you would ask them for your kids, right? You know, one thing that we fail to do, that I really strive to do with the kids, trying to teach them that, you know, we're going on a trip, everybody, all right, let's pray, let's sort of keep us safe, you know. Make sure when you get there, you thank him, right? Instead of just, you know, the next time you think about it is when you're coming back, and all right, oh, thank you for keeping us safe while we're down here, keep us safe as we go home, you know. And that's the easy thing to do at times, to do that. So that's important for kids to understand that. So Exodus 13, I asked you a question last week starting off. Have you ever been to a point in life where you're not quite sure what the next step is? And the answer was absolutely. We've been there. Maybe you are there even now. To the point where sometimes you're not really quite sure where to proceed in life. You know, not even the next, you know, month's decisions. And so you wonder, okay, what's the Lord doing? What's the Lord up to in my life? As we talked about the children of Israel, the title of this particular lesson is Now What, Lord, right? Because sometimes God does something and we just like, okay, Lord, I don't even understand why this is happening, why it's happening now, why it's happening to them, why it's happening to me. And so the point of the account where we picked up last week was the children of Israel had kind of come to that same point. They had already been delivered by God through God's man for the hour, Moses. He had already brought them out of Egypt, out of bondage. And remember, they could have really got to where he was getting them to pretty quick, right? But instead, God chose to take them the long route. And we talked about last week, the first thought was we saw the intentions of the Lord. And the Bible says it came to pass that when Pharaoh let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. And that was in Exodus 13:17. Why did God do that? Y'all remember?
They were afraid they'd turn around and go back if they were fighting the Philistines.
Yeah. God said, you know, when they find out that they're having to go in the enemy territory, they don't want to go through that. They don't want to have to go through that. Bible says, for God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, change their mind, and they return to Egypt. It says, but God led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. And so we talked about how God did that. God intentionally led them. It was his plan. It was part of his will for them. And sometimes we get sideways because we don't understand why God didn't take us the easy way. You know, why didn't you just do this 14 years ago, God, and I wouldn't have to go through this last hardship, right? And so God led to the wilderness because he knew they'd change their mind when they realized how hard it would be and how they would have to fight. So sometimes God, when he leads us in our lives, he does take us through the wilderness. But again, it's not to hurt us, it's not to harm us, it's to strengthen us, it's to teach us, it's to help us follow him and seek him, right? He takes us to something that's impassable and impossible. We know that he can do that. So, but he didn't leave them stranded either, though, right? He left them with a plan. He didn't leave them to figure it out, but he led them. Verse 21 says, and the Lord went before them by day. So God didn't say, hey, I don't want y'all to go that route. Y'all go the long route. I'll catch you on the other side. No, how did he lead them at this particular time? Cloud by day. And a cloud by night, a pillar of fire by night, right? And so that's exactly what he did. Very, very distinctive. He went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them by the way, and the night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night. So, and the Bible said he did not take it away from them, for the people. But then he made the plight a little bit deeper, right? So they're following him. Everything so far so good. We're getting out of here. We've been funded. We know exactly where we're going. God's leading us. And then what happens? They come to an impossible situation, right? God had a plan for the Hebrews. He also had a plan for the enemies of God, all right? So by placing him in this very precarious situation where the mountains were all around on one side, the river on the other side, the Egyptians behind them, God revealed to them his power to save them and take care of them, right, by wiping out the primary threat, which was Egypt. So we saw the intentions of the Lord and then how he led them through the way, but it didn't make anything easier for God's leader. So we see the inquisition then of the leader. We talked about that last week. Moses was the leader, right? And that they began to put him on trial, so to speak. Why did you do this? Or why are you not doing this? Why, Moses? They're like, is this not the word we did tell thee? Let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. And so fear began to swell up in their lives, and they began to blame God's man. How quickly they forgot the blessings of God, right? The freedom that they were experiencing. And now they come to the point where, by the way, isn't that how we do it when things don't work out for us? We're looking for somebody to blame all the time. We're always, well, it's the economy. It's this, it's our president, it's my husband, it's my children, it's my parents, it's my, it's my work situation, it's my health, we're always looking for a reason to justify our actions. Or a person. In this particular place, they're trying to blame God's person. They forgot the blessings of leaving the cruelty of the enslavement they were in, right? The submission to this heathen nation. So the question is, now what are we going to do? Now what are we going to do? But God had already taken Moses through the wilderness before, right? So he had been there before. He had some experience there. And so he knew God was capable of deliverance. And so the third thing we talked about last week was the inspiration of their leader. Moses springs to action. He tells them what all good leaders should say. The counsel was this: fear not, stand still, and look what God's going to do. Basically what he was saying there. And that was a very initial, quick reaction. Then God said, okay, that's good. Now here's what I want you to do. Don't stand still anymore. Go forward. Okay, God, like over those mountains? No. Like right through there. Right through the water. And so that's what God was going to do right there. And again, I think it was a turning point for a bunch of families, a bunch of Jewish families at that point. They saw God do something tremendous. And that's why it's so important that we tell our children and we tell our grandchildren the things that God has done for us. They need to hear the victories. When we talk in a couple of weeks on the May 7th day, we are going to allow some of our young people to be reminded of the victories of God. Our young people, I mean, think about it, 5 years ago, okay? In 5 years, or in just a couple of months, it's been 5 years since we've been here. Hard to believe. But the 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, high school seniors now were only 12 years old. They don't remember the victories that God brought us through and how he supplied all that. Even the 22-year-olds now are only, 16, 17. They weren't thinking, much about what God's doing. And what they need to be reminded of the victories. And if we don't tell them, who is? And if they don't hear the victories in our lives, how are they ever going to have the hope and the confidence that God can do the same for them in their lives, right? They're going to be the 30-year-olds and the 35-year-olds in the days ahead making decisions and, in the ministry here. And they need to hear and know and be reminded, look, God did it for my parents. God did it for our grandparents. God do it for us. That's what Moses is doing right here, saying, look, God can do this. He said, fear not, stand still, see the salvation of the Lord. Moses had been there. There was a time we were talking about Daryl this weekend, my uncle who had passed, and we loved hunting with him and fishing and different things like that. One of the times we remember, Ben and I and my cousins, we were in Louisiana, and we were duck hunting in a place called the Beff Wildlife. It's French, B-O-U-E-F-F, but they call it the Beff. And there was a river, and we would put our boat in, go up the river, and then hunt, find places off the river to hunt for ducks. Well, this particular year, it flooded. I mean, it flooded so bad. Do you know how, you know what a gas line is, right? You see a gas line, like a power line. It's been cut out and trimmed for the gas lines to run through there, so they don't let no trees go through. Like a power line without the power lines. And they have those yellow, things in it, stickers or the flag, just so you know where the gas lines are, the yellow poles. Well, in this river that we were going, there was a gas line that crossed it. So we're driving down the river, and the gas line ran perpendicular and crossed it. But it was probably 15 to 18 feet up on one side of the river where the gas line was. So the gas line came, dropped off the river, and then, the land kept going. This particular year, there was so much rain in Louisiana, I kid you not, that when we were going down the river, he just turned right on the gas line. Never even slowed down. The water was that high. And we rode forever on the gas line because it was that much water going up. And we're going down, and I'm seeing those little yellow things going underneath the boat. I'm going, oh my word, the rudder of this boat, the propeller is going to be capping some gas line. We're going to blow up. I was like, ugh. And it was so foggy, literally so foggy, that we couldn't turn the light up like here, because if you put light in the fog, it just blinds you. So we had to hold the light really low, but then he's like, just turn the light off. And he had a little Garmin E-Trex $69 GPS from Walmart type deal, right? And he was watching this thing right here, and he hammers down. Y'all sit down. It's dark. It's dark, like before sun, no sun. He's not even looking where he's going. And he cuts off that gas line. We're like, oh man. Ben and I are like looking at each other like this is about the craziest thing we've ever done. He goes, he's all right. You should be seeing that light over there. You should be seeing a milk jug I tied on top of some trees. And sure enough, we're looking over that because we couldn't turn the light front, so we could look to the side. And sure enough, we found that thing. Boom, he pulls in there, and we set up. And these trees, our decoys are normally 6-8 foot string. We were duck hunting with trees that were like 30 feet tall. So we had to tie decoys to the treetops and not resting their anchor on the ground. So anyway, we're coming back to the same thing. It's raining, sleeting, and he's just looking at that thing going back. And here's the difference. We were scared to death. It was dark. We didn't know where we were going, but he had been there before. He knew where he was going. He had been there. And guys, when we're going through the dark times in our lives, when it's raining, and he's been there. He knows exactly where he's taking us. And the best thing we can do is just sit down, shut up, and hold on, right? Pretty much. That's where we're at in life. Because he's been there before. He knows right where he's going, and we shouldn't have to worry about it. You would think, well, if we were younger, we probably wouldn't have worried about it. We probably would have been like, oh, Uncle Darrell, he knows where he's going. But we kind of old enough to know better. You know what I mean? Like, we never would have done that. We could have went out there by ourselves at a much slower pace. And sometimes we get that with God. We go, okay, God, I kind of know where we're going here. We could do this. Whoa, wait a minute, God, you're taking me to places now. And sometimes we get a little fearful, right? And we start doubting God. He's been there. That's how we know he can get us to where he wants us to go. So they begin to question the leader that God put in their life, and we do that sometimes as well. So then we see the inspiration of their leader. He said, be still, stand up, don't be still, just watch what God's going to do. And then God says, in verse 14, we see the instructions then by the Lord. He says, the Lord shall fight for you, and he shall hold your peace. He says, why criest thou unto me, speaking to the children of Israel, that they go forward? Now, the response of God is like, don't sit there no more. You need to go forward. Moses, go. Take what you've got, the rod, stretch out over the sea and start walking. He says, verse 16, but lift up thy rod, stretch out thy hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And as leaders, there are times that we must press forward. It's easier to say, let's just wait right here and see what God's going to do. Right? Let's go on. Let's step out on faith. Let's head towards the water. Even if we get over our heads, that's what we should be able to do, but it's not easy always to do that. There are a lot of times in my leadership where I want to say, let's hold up right here. If I was Moses, I wouldn't have been real quick to say, all right, y'all start walking towards that water right there. Because, my neck is on the line at that point, right? So hold up rather than head out is usually what we're going to say, but that's not what God did. God said, I'll harden the hearts of the Egyptians, they shall follow them. I will get me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, upon his chariots, upon his horsemen, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I've gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, upon his horsemen. Goes back to God doing things for our benefit, right, and his glory. And so, remember, so we closed up here last week. How were the children of Israel being led by God?
Pillar of fire at night.
Pillar of cloud by day, all right? So, in verse number 21, it says, the Lord went before them by day in a cloud and by night. He didn't take it away. But now when we move to the next chapter, verse 19, it says, and the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud that went from before their face and stood behind them. So we see where God went from guide to guardian, right? And how he removed himself from that pillar of cloud from the front, leading them to the rear, and it has protection, all right? And that's where we picked up, that's where we left off last week. I believe we could drive a parallel to how the Lord Jesus Christ, upon salvation, shows us the light of our paths, right? He shows us our ways while protecting us from behind in our enemy's pursuit, okay? Verse 20. It came, talking about the cloud, it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and a darkness to them. But notice what it says, it gave light by night to these, so that one came not near the other all the night. So see what's going on right here. There was a cloud that was darkening the way of the Egyptians. They had no idea. It was pitch black for them. But it was a brilliance of light for God's people, so they know right where to go, how to go, the path to take. They weren't stumbling over everything. God gave protection to them through that. What a mighty God to not only control the elements of the world, but the hearts of men, right? That's how God does that. And we see that further demonstrated in the rest of the chapter. It's here where we see then their freedom. Number 5, if you're taking notes, their independence by the Lord. All right, so they get their freedom. Like I said, God didn't leave the children of Israel stranded, and he won't us. He didn't leave them without a plan. Even more so, he didn't leave them to figure it out on their own, but he led them. Verse 21, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night. And he made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on the right hand and on their left. Y'all have seen Charles Heston, hadn't you? You seen him part the water? I don't know that it's a whole lot different. I don't know. In my mind, I'm not sure exactly how God could have did it any differently than blowing that wind out there, unless he just, I don't know. That's seemingly, even though it's an old picture show, right? That just seems like God just blew it through there, walled it up on the sides, and let's go. It wasn't muddy, though. It was dry ground, so the wind dried up the ground as well. And I'm not sure what the Red Sea in your life looks like right now. I don't know what insurmountable odds that you stand up against. I'm not sure how hard the enemy is pressing on you right now. Because you got to understand, not only were they facing an impossible situation, they had they were breathing down on their necks. The Egyptians were sent to take them back. That's what they were doing. And so, furthermore, then I have no clue what your deliverance looks like. Right? I don't know what that wall looked like of water when it blew up. I don't know what God's going to do in your life. But the one thing I do know is that He knows what it all looks like. He knows what's up in front of you. He knows what's behind you. He knows the elements of all, and He knows how He's going to get you out of that. He sees what's ahead of us, what's behind us, and the pressure that's placing on our life, and He has a plan. He will grant us the independence, our liberty, the freedom from it all. Verse 23, the Egyptians pursued, and he went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Now, if I'm honest with you, as I think about this Egyptian army here, what were they thinking following the Israelites into the sea? You know what I mean? It's like, here's your sign, you know? You're chasing a group of people, God's people, and you know that. You just had your firstborn children killed. It's not like they had been and seen this before. This wasn't like an attraction at Disney World. Let's go see the walls, the water of walls down at Disney, right? And walk across on dry ground. No, this was never seen before. So as they approach it, now who knows? Pharaoh may have been in the back going, "Go get them." You know, the first guys are going, "Are you kidding me?" But they had to go, right? I mean, it was either face water or face sure death, certain death. So here they go. I guess after a period of time, they're following through there, and Pharaoh's like, "All right, let's go. They're good. I don't know. Seems like a dumb move to me. You know what I mean, Brother Foot? I just like, if the God who killed all the firstborns in Egypt could have done that, He's the one that's holding these walls of water up. Surely one of those guys were like, "Pharaoh, I don't think it's a really good idea. It's not a good battle plan. What if we get in there and the walls collapse on us? We're gone. We're dead." I guess he didn't take their advice. Well, I know he didn't take their advice. So, verse 24, it came to pass that in the morning, verse 23 says they pursued, they went after him. Verse 24 came to pass that in the morning watch, the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians. Now, I never paid attention to this phrase before while studying that. Verse 24, two things. The Lord brought them when? What does it say? Through the night, right? In the morning watch. He brought them through the night, through the darkness, through the most fearful time. And it says, it came to pass that in the morning watch, the Lord looked. And can I say, it doesn't matter how dark it may seem in your life. It doesn't matter how much wind is blowing. God will bring deliverance in the morning light. David the psalmist, he knew about this. He knew about the darkness of depression. Psalm 30, he says, listen to what David says about this dark time in his life. He says, "I will extol thee, O Lord. Thou hast lifted me up, hast not made my foes to rejoice over me." He's like, "Man, you brought deliverance in my life. O Lord, my God, I cried unto thee, and thou hast healed me. O Lord, thou hast brought up my soul from the grave." He says, I was dead. Thou hast brought up my soul from the grave. Thou hast kept me alive, that I should not go down to the pit. And he says, "Sing unto the Lord, O ye saints of his. Give thanks at the remembrance of his holiness. For his anger endureth but for a moment, and his favor is life." And then that famous phrase we know, "Weeping may endure for a night, but what? Joy cometh in the morning." David is like, "Yeah, I know it's dark, but God, you brought me through that. And I cried my eyes out." He said, "Man, I was bitterly weeping." In my prosperity I said, I shall never be moved. Lord, by thy favor thou hast made my mountain to stand strong. Thou didst hide thy face, and I was troubled. I cried to thee, O Lord, and unto the Lord I made supplication. What profit is there in my blood when I go down to the pit? Shall the dust praise thee? Shall it declare thy truth? Hear, O Lord, have mercy upon me. Lord, be thou my helper. Thou hast turned from me my mourning into dancing. Thou hast put off my sackcloth and girded me with gladness, to the end that my glory may sing praise to thee and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks unto thee forever. David says, I don't care, it's dark. I was down, I was going under, I was near death. And God, you brought me through. So I say, weeping may endure for a night, but joy does come in the morning. And again, folks like Brother Bell could testify that to you guys, right? The weeping was there, the bitterness was there, the difficulties were there, but there was light, right? Joy came in the morning. So back to verse 24. Not only does the Lord bring them through the night, a second thing, he was with them. Why do I say he was with them? How do I know that? I mean, right with them, right at the very spot. How do I know that?
Verse 24 says, you look at the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of cloud.
Yeah. So where were the Egyptians at? Behind them. So, yep, the Egyptians, the cloud, the Israelites. And if God looked through the cloud to see the Egyptians, he was on the side of the Israelites, right? Right there in the very spot, right when not some remote, lofty location, not some distant. He was even the angle that he looked through them, right, through the cloud. So he looked through them. He looked at the ones, at the things pressing down on his children. What more proof do we need that God is exactly where we are in our times of trouble, right? What we're enduring. What a comforting thought that God knows where we're at, what we're feeling, what we're fearing, and then he does something about it. Look at verse 25. He took off their chariots, that they drave them heavily. So the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. They should have known that. He'd already done this before. And the Lord said to Moses, all right, bud, now stretch out thy hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, upon their horsemen. The Bible says, and Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared. And the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Done. Wiped them out. The waters returned. They covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the hosts of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained very, very few of the Egyptians. Is that what it says? There remained not so much as one of them. Like, there was not even anybody even to go back and tell the Egyptians, look what happened. They didn't go back and tell their wives, husband's not coming home. So I have to assume that at some point there were some folks in Egypt who were like, they should be back by now. Let's send out a crew, let's send a team and see what's going on. They go out there and they overlook, and there's chariot pieces of wood. There's probably bodies. There's probably just a massive amount of Egyptians and animals floating all over the place. I think that would have got their attention as well, right? Not just the people back there. Talk about covering up their problems, right? Talk about God washing away their worries. I mean, literally. So let's close today by saying really real quick the fullness of the deliverance of the Israelites here. Verse 29 says, but the children of Israel walked upon dry land into the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on the right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. God didn't even leave a hint of their worries to Israel either. He allowed them, according to verse number 30 here, to actually see their pursuers lifeless. Like, you don't have to worry about them anymore. They're not coming after you. Look, you can see that. They were no more a threat. So what's the point? What's the lesson I've been trying to teach in these last two deals here? What's the outcome of this scriptural account? How is it applied to us today? I believe it's summed up in the last verse of chapter 14, verse 31. And Israel saw, by the way, what was my question to you? Now what, Lord? Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians. And the Bible says, and the people feared the Lord, they believed in the Lord, they believed in his servant Moses. That's the whole point. The children of Israel saw their problems literally washed away. They saw the power of the Lord in their midst as the people feared the Lord. And it caused them to once again remember who it was that they were following, who again that once they were trusting. And it was proof to them to follow God and to follow his man, right? God says, look, I'm delivering you out of here. Trust me, trust the God, trust the leadership that I'm putting in your life. You know, it's our kids, they're classic examples. Maybe we were too when we were young people. God put parents in our lives, right? For a reason. And how many times do our children, maybe your children, we really want to follow your rules. We don't want to follow, that's very archaic to follow your rules. We're going to do our own thing, right? What better proof to see God bring a deliverance when we follow him? And we're like that sometimes. We're like, we really want to follow God. We really want to follow the leadership that God placed in our lives, spiritual leadership in our lives. And what happens when we do? We see the deliverance of God, right? God taught them that day. And that's why I say it's so important that our children, our grandchildren, hear and see the victories of God, the deliverance of God in our lives. It's a reminder that they better follow God. And by the way, I don't know that the children of Israel did a very good job doing that. Why would I say that? Okay. But there came a point in the life of the children of Israel where they began to get away from the leadership of God, right? Remember when they said, we want a what? We want a king, like everybody else. God says, no, you don't. I've been leading you. And he takes them back. I brought your fathers out of the land of Egypt. I brought them through the Dead Sea. We've done all the walls of Jericho. God provided all these things. And still they're like, nah, we think a man's better than that. And so I don't know that they did as good a job of making sure that their children and their grandchildren knew who God was and what he could do. I think it's important for us to do that. I've got a rejuvenated sense of making sure my future grandchild, right, is getting the teaching here at this church, in the nursery, in the 2-year-olds, in the 3-year-olds, in the junior churches, in the youth department. I want to make sure, for 24 years, that my son's been alive and all 6 of my children, I've had a vested interest in this place. It's not just a matter of throwing in there a guy or a girl who could teach a class. I want to make sure people are trying their best. Are we perfect? No. I can give you a list of things that we're imperfect here. But one of the things we strive is to make sure we're having a good time when it comes to working with our kids and our grandkids and our children, our teenagers, but we're not playing games when it comes to what they're trying to teach them, right? And this is so important. So now I just have a rejuvenated sense of let's make sure that we're not just filling the hour with a bunch of fun and games, that we're trying to teach these kids something. Those 3-year-olds can learn something about God every Sunday, every Wednesday night. Whether it's just a minute aspect of who made the world, God did, right? It starts. So anyway, I am concerned about your grandchildren as if they were mine, right? So, all righty. Thank you for your time. Let's have a word of prayer. You can turn that off. Yeah, thank y'all for tuning in today. We hope that was an encouragement to you tonight. You may want to know more information. Maybe you have some questions. Maybe you'd like to pray with somebody and talk to somebody about some spiritual matters in your life. We have a pastoral care line, and we would love for you to be able to call. We have pastors standing by right now to be able to take those calls and assist you. We also have Wednesday night program for our teens as well as our young people. We have an Awana program here, and perhaps you or someone you know might like to be a part of that. You can find this and a whole lot more information on our website, VictoryBaptist.Church. God bless you and have a great evening.